4.
Tyler, I'll be out back. You mind Archer now. You hear?
Mr. Timberlake seemed to trust that he could leave Archer in charge without waiting for confirmation from either of them. Once he was out the back door, Archer was on his own. Tyler Timberlake, with the dipper stick hanging lazily from his mouth, stood staring at Archer. He seemed to be waiting for further instruction. "So, do you want to show me your room?" Archer asked. The boy began to walk away, but Archer called, "Wait!" He gently pulled the dipper from the boy's mouth and took it to the sink, where he rinsed it off and set it down. "Okay, now we're ready." They scaled the stairs together. Tyler took Archer to a room down a narrow hall with wainscoting painted the color of a rusty tractor. Archer noted the dark wood rails and the beadboard ceiling. The house was so much older and fancier than either his grandparents' house or his home back in Mobile. "It sure is beautiful," he thought, even though it obviously needed some elbow grease here and there. Tyler's room was narrow and rectangular. It was sparsely decorated. There was a twin bed, a set of shelves with a few books and wooden toys, and an oval, multicolored braided rag rug in the center of the floor. Archer realized what a huge house it was for just 2 people to be living in it. He wondered if they ever got lonely. Tyler stood next to the shelves as though waiting for Archer to select something to read. Archer found a copy of The Wind in the Willows, one of his favorites when he was smaller. He held it up. "How about this one?" Tyler climbed onto the bed, so Archer sat next to him and cracked open the spine. He began to read aloud and was surprised by his own inflection. He'd never read a book out loud to a little kid before. After a few pages, he found himself really getting into it, making voices and even waving around his free hand. But over time, Tyler, who had been rapt at first, began to fidget. His toes wiggled, then his knees popped up and down. He bounced lightly, then slid onto the floor and tapped his feet. Archer tried saying things like, "Sit down, please," and "Tyler, please stay still." But the more time passed, the more restless he became until Archer couldn't do or say anything that would keep him quiet. Archer checked his smartwatch. It had been only 20 minutes since he'd started the babysitting job. Tyler began to spin aimlessly around the room. He looked out the window. He rolled under the bed. He took all the toys off of the shelf, played with them for mere seconds, then tossed them away. He flipped through the books and turned the light switch on and off and used the bed cover like a cape. Throughout this, he became more and more verbal. At first, he commanded Archer to look at everything he was doing. Then he started asking questions. "How old are you? Do you like ice cream? How many brothers and sisters do you have?" Then he began to answer his own questions. "Have you ever looked at Jupiter through a telescope?" "I have. It was really big. It was kind of fuzzy. They say it has an eye. Did you know about the eye? It's not really an eye, though. It's just gas. Not farting gas. But that would be funny, wouldn't it? If planets could fart." He laughed maniacally. Then he began making farting noises, cracking himself up. He blew raspberries louder and louder, running around in circles, spraying saliva everywhere. Archer watched all of this with disgust and fascination. It was like Tyler had turned into a completely different kid. This must have been what his dad was talking about when he said Tyler had a lot of energy. Tyler ran over to Archer and blew raspberries all over Archer's face. Saliva speckled his cheeks. Disgusting. Archer felt mild rage. This was why he didn't like little kids. They were like wild animals. Tyler's dad had also said honey had calming properties. I recommend you feed it to him often. Hey, Tyler, Archer said, trying to get the boy's attention. Eventually, he had to go over and place his hands on Tyler's shoulders to force him to stop running around. Tyler? Tyler? The boy looked up at Archer with crazed eyes. How about some more honey? How does that sound? Honey! I love honey! Archer sighed. Great. Let's go get some more. The jar was almost empty, and Tyler was ravenous. A few scoops of the dipper, and it was all gone. Archer watched Tyler become practically catatonic compared to how he had been acting mere minutes earlier. Archer didn't know much about the health-giving properties of honey, but this was kind of bizarre. He didn't remember ever feeling this effect when his mom put honey in his hibiscus tea. Do you want to read more books? Archer asked. Or maybe we could do something else. Do you have any board games? Checkers? Chess? Tyler didn't answer. Instead, he started humming again, a low, resonant buzz. Archer walked around the kitchen, investigating inside the cabinets for something to do. There weren't any board games, but he found pens and paper. He figured they could play tic-tac-toe. As he led Tyler to the kitchen table, they crossed in front of a window that looked out over the backyard. Archer spotted Mr. Timberlake, all suited up in a white outfit that covered him, head to toe. The cylindrical hood had a black screen to cover his face, presumably to protect him from any bee stings. He carried a large metal canister that sprayed smoke in a thick stream over the boxes of hives. Archer wondered what the smoke was for. Maybe he would ask Mr. Timberlake later. At the table, Archer and Tyler played round after round of tic-tac-toe. But just as before, the boy gradually became restless. Archer checked his watch. He was only 45 minutes into his hour-long babysitting session. He needed to calm Tyler down for a few more minutes. When Archer went to the counter, he found the last jar of honey empty. Another scan of the cabinets, and there was no more to be found. Tyler, do you know if your dad has any more honey in the house? The boy hopped up and began skipping towards the living room. Archer panicked when he thought the boy was headed for the front door. He couldn't let Tyler go outside. If the kid disturbed his dad, Archer would never be invited to babysit again. He was about to grab Tyler when the kid made a sharp right turn. He circled, stopped, and hopped in place next to a small door under the stairs, waiting. Curious, Archer opened the small door and felt a cool, musty puff of air hit his cheeks. He smelled fresh dirt and something else, something sickly sweet. Another set of stairs with open, rough-hewn wood treads led down into a dark cellar. Archer looked for a light switch, but there was none. The boy hummed at Archer impatiently. There must be more honey down there, Archer thought. He hoped there was a light switch at the bottom of the stairs. He descended, noticing within a few steps the cellar wasn't completely dark. There was a light somewhere below that glowed faint and green, like a glow stick on Halloween night. The humming intensified. He glanced back, expecting to see Tyler on his tail, but Tyler was at the top of the steps, silhouetted, waiting. Archer cocked his head. The humming came from down below. At the bottom of the stairs, Archer stepped onto the packed dirt floor and scanned the room. There was a set of floor-to-ceiling shelves immediately ahead, and each shelf was flush with glass jars. The jars were glowing. They were full of an iridescent liquid. Was it honey? Archer walked over and picked one up. Sure enough, the viscous liquid moved slowly back and forth as he tilted the jar. It certainly looked and acted like honey. But why was it glowing like a lightning bug on a summer night? Did this mean it was old or spoiled? How could he know if it was fresh and safe for Tyler to eat? Archer turned to take the honey upstairs where he could inspect it more closely in the daylight. It shone brightly in his hand, a dim lantern in the dark. That was when Archer saw the rest of the basement. The walls were moving, vibrating, as though they were made of liquid too. Archer approached the wall next to the staircase and held out the jar of glowing honey to get a better look. The buzzing was louder than ever now. And that's when Archer saw the walls were covered in bees. Their black and yellow bodies wiggled back and forth, and their wings beat rapidly in unison. They coated the walls like a carpet from top to bottom and side to side. Looking up, Archer saw they also covered the ceiling. They were everywhere, except on the jars of honey or the stairs themselves. He didn't pause to think of what might happen if they were disturbed. Archer sprinted up the staircase as fast as he could, holding the jar of honey in his hand. As soon as his feet hit the landing, he slammed the tiny door shut behind him. He leaned against it, shivering with fear. Tyler's eyes were glued to the jar. Archer glanced down at it. The liquid no longer glowed bright green. It looked perfectly normal. Just a regular old jar of creamy golden honey with a small piece of honeycomb sticking up near the top. Tyler took the jar out of Archer's hands, unscrewed it, and jabbed a chubby finger inside. He scooped out a chunk of the runny goo and wrapped his mouth around it, closing his eyes, murmuring softly in delight. But Archer was certain he could still hear the buzzing of bees below. And he had no idea what to do.